Soccer in Europe and England is big business. Teams such as Manchester United, Juventus and Lazio are well recognised worldwide. Stadiums are overcrowded with passionate fans. However, in Australia, soccer does not have the same status. Most teams in the National Soccer League play to small crowds of between 2,000 to 3,000. David Hill, the former chairman of Soccer Australia, is certain that soccer will not progress as long as the clubs are represented by different ethnic groups.
These clubs are appealing only to a small section of the Australian community, when for soccer to realise its true potential should be appealing to everyone. We should be promoting a sense of access and ownership by all Australians. The truth is, nobody will go to watch Sydney United play unless they're a member of the Australian-Croatian community.
You can be anywhere on this planet and you start to bring out this little round ball and kick it and people have an opinion on it. So I think in fact it's the other way, that I think the football has brought the cultures together and allows the integration. We have quite a large multicultural society, and we're, I think, renowned as one of the better multicultural societies. And you've got to look at why. And I think the ability, the sport of soccer, football, however you want to call it, has contributed to that.
Hill's attempts to revamp the game were contentious. One of his decisions was to permanently remove Heidelberg, Brunswick and Parramatta Melita Eagles from the National Soccer League.
It's a decision which I think was detrimental to a very progressive club.
Sam Vella was the president of Parramatta Eagles when the decision was made to drop the club from the National Soccer League.
It was like being stabbed in the heart, not just myself, all our supporters, the whole club. A few months later, after the event, I got a stroke, and that's what put me out of the club.
David Hill was adamant that the three clubs that were knocked out failed to meet the minimum standards of performance. Yet Doris Drury, the president of Parramatta Eagles, is not convinced.
To this day we're still waiting for that reason. No valid reason has ever been given to this club for being dropped from the National League. The only crime that we could see was that we finished third bottom in the competition that particular year.
Hill felt that his decision to drop Parramatta Eagles was radical but necessary.
I understand why those clubs are upset with me, because they have achieved a great deal for Australian soccer. For what we have achieved, they should take the overwhelming, if not all, of the credit. But they're also holding back soccer by restricting their appeal to their own communities, and most of those clubs that I've mentioned would play in front of crowds of 2,000 and 3,000. It's not even viable for them, and it's certainly not viable for soccer.
One door may have shut for Parramatta Eagles, but another has opened. Earlier this year, they merged with the Parramatta Leagues Club, a major sponsor of the Eagles. The new team, Parramatta Power, will be part of next season's NSL. An increasingly popular team on the soccer scene is the Northern Spirit. This team has regularly drawn enormous crowds to its games because of its appeal to a large multicultural base in North Sydney.
We are perceived by the market to be inclusive of everyone. Fairly or unfairly, some of the other teams in the league are seen to be captives of one ethnic segment.
How does Northern Spirits differ from the rest of the NSL teams?
It's not Greek, it's not Italian, it's not Croatian, it's all of the above.
Multicultural team.
Multicultural, exactly. They don't base them. All the people who are involved in the administration, they come from all backgrounds. They're not one particular background. I think that's what appeals to all the youngsters, whether they be 8 years old or 18-year-old or 38, 48-year-olds. I think the only thing holding soccer back in this country is the fact that certain ethnic groups will not let go, will not open their doors to everybody. That's the only thing that's holding soccer back. And I want the Greeks to come to the soccer matches because they create such an atmosphere, but I want the Croats and the Greeks to come at the same time and not feel afraid of each other or want to bash the living daylights out of each other. The sooner the supporters accept everybody, whether you're Greek, Italian, Yugoslav, whatever it might be, then this game will take off. If they continue to confine themselves to one ethnic base, they're going to die a sudden death.
You can't recondition or re-engineer a market's thinking in 48 hours. You've spent 30 years building up a certain market perception. It's going to take a long time, if at all, for the market to recondition its thinking.
Tony Labazetta, the president of the Marconi Club, believes that soccer's lack of progression is not based on ethnic backgrounds, but on the politics of the game.
What is important is that we try to minimise these political factions that we always seem to have, and we concentrate our efforts into the development of the game.
Politically, it was about looking after it. I remember when we knocked out the Heidelberg Greek club in Melbourne, and as you know, I'm very close to the Greek community, and these guys said to me, "But David, when you were elected chairman of soccer, you were going to fix things." And I said, "That's what I'm doing. I'm trying to make soccer better and bigger." And they said, no, you were supposed to look after us, because that's the way it's always been done. Everybody looks after everybody else. And the problem is, soccer hasn't gone forward. I tell you what you have to say, you have to acknowledge. The soccer in the last 3 years has gone forward more than it has in the last 30 years.
SBS has been known as the soccer station since its inception in 1980. Holding the exclusive rights to the last 3 World Cups, SBS was put on the map in terms of its coverage of soccer, both nationally and internationally. Les Murray has been involved in soccer both as a commentator and a journalist, and is currently the head of sport at SBS. Why won't other networks embrace soccer the way that SBS has?
Because soccer has for a long time not been part of or a large part of the Australian sporting culture. It was for a long time seen as the migrants' game. So, and obviously it was not something that they thought belonged to the mainstream, and therefore it didn't rate very well. And television networks, basically, particularly the commercial networks, are not really interested in opening up new markets. They want to get into established markets where they can get commercial revenue.
Les Murray believes a great injustice has been done to the coverage of the NSL since their contract expired in 1998. Currently, Channel 7 have the rights. Are you disappointed with Channel 7's commitment to the NSL?
I'm disappointed because it represented, and I would have thought, an opening for the game. To be fully exploited and promoted by a commercial network which allegedly, or we are told, has massive access to an audience, which we were told SBS doesn't have. But in fact they haven't done that.
SBS's commitment to the National Soccer League has been outstanding because of its dedication to primetime slots and hour-long programs. Unfortunately, Channel 7 have not shared the same commitment. They have assigned the broadcasting rights to the ABC. Hill was aware of this, however his decision was based on getting the game into the mainstream. Despite his good intentions, the National Soccer League is now sitting on the shelf.
I must say, incidentally, SBS deserves its reputation as the soccer channel, but they were never capable, because of their extremely limited audience reach, they were never capable of taking and making soccer a mainstream sport. They were never capable of realising the potential of soccer as a mainstream social phenomenon in Australia and a mainstream sport. So I don't think we should get too excited about the fact that it's not on SBS anymore. It's been on SBS, almost entirely SBS, for over 20 years, and it never went anywhere.
Not only was he harsh, he was totally inaccurate. SBS has no problem with its reach. SBM reaches over 17 million of people of Australia's 18 million population. So what's the problem with its reach? I really don't know what Mr. Hill is talking about. perhaps Mr. Hill didn't spend long enough as head of the ABC, because he seems to know extremely little about television. What is most important when you put a game or put a sport on television is not the deal that you sign, not the contract that you sign, but the commitment that the television station makes in exposing your product.
You've got all these people who've been watching soccer for years and years on free-to-air television. All of a sudden, they can't see it anymore, and they're getting pretty wild. Why Channel 7 have done that, I guess you'd have to ask the boss of Channel 7.
We attempted on several occasions to speak to Harold Anderson, the Director of Sport at Channel 7. However, we were not granted any interviews.
If I had to pick between the current contract and the contract that had been, I'd probably go for the previous contract, because it's a very different aspect of having commercial broadcast or mainstream exposure of a particular percentage, whereas you have the full support of a TV station. So what it means is, instead of getting 5 minutes on the weekend or 10 minutes, you actually have a station that dedicates probably something like 10 to 12 hours a week. That's crucial.
I don't think the ABC does us any extra favours in opening up new markets, and doesn't satisfy the criteria of higher ratings either. So, you know, I think the problem we've got at the moment is that had Channel 7 invested the requisite energy and resources into developing the game, we would have been better off. But I believe we are now no better off without the very strong support of SBS.
With Channel 7's investment of more than $20 million over the next 10 years into soccer, one would expect to see a significant improvement in the promotion of the game. So far, this has not been the case.
Channel 7 made it quite clear, as all the commercial networks made quite clear, they're not interested in the National League in its current state. Why? Why? Because television, commercial television, is about appealing to the mainstream Australian audiences. And what Channel 7 was saying is, that is appealing to the Calabrian Italian community or the Croatian community or the Greek community. We'd be mad to show National League in its current state on mainstream commercial television.
The reason soccer doesn't appeal to anybody above the age of 14, 15, 16, I say it doesn't appeal to any more people, is because we don't have a marketing arm in soccer. You look at the promotions for the AFL and the Rugby League, and they spend millions of dollars on putting attention-grabbing commercials on the television. What do we have? We have nothing. So unless we're willing to spend the money to grab their attention, to make this game bigger than life itself, then we are going to continue to lose our 14, 15 and 16-year-olds. I just go around the clubs and the schools trying to create some sort of dream for these kids. So often these kids, they see you on the TV, but they think it's a million miles away. If Socceroos keep turning up to clinics often enough, like the Northern Spirit are doing in fact, then I think these kids just might carry on, where most of the time they'll quit when they get to 14, 15 and it starts to get a little bit harder. I'd create heroes for the kids. All these kids are training...
You're a hero.
I'm yesterday's hero, unfortunately. It's too late for me. Yeah, it's up to me to produce these heroes. Not to produce their heroes, to brag about the heroes. That's my job. It's my job to brag about Harry Kewell, my job to brag about Robbie Slater. But you've got to do it time and time again. Not once every 4 years like we do when the World Cup comes round. It's not good enough. You've got to do it season after season, week after week. It's got to be back page, it's got to be inside back page of every newspaper. Then you'll see soccer take off. You want the cup of life. Now that the day's here, we're gonna go